building, because this is a skill that goes beyond fighting games. Obviously,
Absolutely,
community
yeah.
building is a huge thing. But I guess at one point there is something that's binding about fighting games that you could argue doesn't exist in other fields, other communities. What is something about fighting games that brings people together? Is it the secret handshake with the about the games, or is it because it's kind of niche and you're happy to see somebody that also knows that game? Gundam Wing.
Yeah.
Gundam Wing guy, you're never gonna forget that guy because of that one moment, right?
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that.
So I guess here's where we tie the martial arts back in, right?
Okay.
So there was a good period where I wasn't really playing fighting games as actively. It was when I was in college, and it was in part because I didn't have a car, and I went to school in SoCal. So with no car, you're dependent on the homie to take you to the arcade.
Oh, that's right.
So I would get out to James Games, or I would get out to Arcade Infinity, whatever I could to get games in. But most of my friends weren't really about that when I was in college, and so I had to find other things to do. And one of the other things I found was martial arts. So I got into at first it's Shotokan karate because that's what Ken and Ryu did in the US manual, right?
Yes.
And then from there, one day, a black belt in that class came into our class and was like, man, I just got my ass kicked at this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class. And I'm like, all right, I have played video games long enough to know I should pick a top tier.
Yeah.
If the black belt in teaching the karate is getting his ass kicked in Jiu-Jitsu, then okay, I'm picking the top tier. I'm learning how to be a grappler, baby. That's what we're doing. Jiu-Jitsu and MMA, kickboxing, wrestling, all that stuff is actually my IRL fighting game for many years, where I kind of put my competitive aspirations for video games on hold for a little bit, because this was during the dark ages, right? We weren't getting American releases of new games very often, especially the Capcom games. Like, they weren't remaking anything. I would still play CVS2 and Guilty Gear and whatever I could, but when I had a local IRL FGC right there playing Jiu-Jitsu, it's like, oh, I'm going to play Jiu-Jitsu because that's what we're here for, you know? So I got really into that. I actually spent a year in Japan on a Fulbright fellowship where I got to train Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Japan. I was in Nagoya for a year training at Alive Academy, which is great. They had some fighters in the UFC, a lot of high-level Jiu-Jitsu players and MMA fighters there.
Yeah.
I also got to train with ethnic Japanese Brazilians who were working in factories and stuff. They're basically immigrant labor. It's a long story, but there's a lot of really cool scholarship about that population of folks.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to do was see, hey, how does their practice of a martial art in an immigrant working community, how do they build community around that? And it was really cool because I would go and train with them, and their level of ability was not nearly as good as like the high-level Japanese pro fighters or whatever.
Sure.
But their practice sessions were community events. So we would get there and we'd train in the gyms, but then like families would come by and maybe it's like someone brought food or the kids would be watching, and then the parents would be socializing while some of their kids were training or something like that. Which was a complete stark contrast to the way that the Japanese gym worked, where it was either professionals or like working adults for whom this was their hobby, right? And so there's still community there, but I never really saw anyone's family or anything like that.
The key component of community is that like people actually care about each other on a certain level, right? This is the best example of a group that's not a community at all. It's like the Costco membership, right? Where it's like everyone, they know about Costco and they probably share the fact that they love the deals that are at Costco. But no one's like gonna do GoFundMe for somebody just because they're
a fellow Costco lover.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that was actually a really early experience in helping me understand how the context around an activity and its role in a social group can change basically the vibes of that group. It's not like the Japanese players didn't care about each other, but their bond was, this is our shared hobby. This is something we both care about. For the Japanese Brazilian players, it was, we are part of a minority here, right? We are all working like factory jobs, right? So there's an element of like, slight disenfranchisement, right? They're here because they have, they're able to come to Japan and work jobs that like native Japanese didn't want to do, right? Because it's too dirty and too dangerous, right? And so for them, as a working minority community, Jiu-Jitsu was a way to kind of be together, right? And it was the bond that they formed was very different, because this is not just a person who I know for wrestling with each other for an hour, which is already a really strong bond, mind you. Like recreationally engaging in hand-to-hand combat with someone is very intimate. But for the Japanese Brazilian players, it was like, this is also an expression of identity. This is a place for us to create space where you assume people are speaking Brazilian, right? Portuguese, instead of Japanese or English or whatever, right? And it created a really warm feeling, even if you weren't practicing. Like, I don't know if you've ever watched anyone practice a sport before, but usually that's not a thing that you would bring spectators along to necessarily.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine that being the first thing that you can.
Yeah, but for them, this is a community event. We have some people working out. Let's watch them. Maybe we'll cheer them on. But also, like, it's an excuse to hang out with each other.
Yeah.
So I'd kind of continued my martial arts career like that. One of my first gigs after college and coming home from Japan was I was a boxing coach in East Oakland, about a couple miles down there, at a nonprofit called the East Oakland Boxing Association. And it was free for kids was the thing. So the idea was we would give kids, especially young men, something to do and a safe place to be where they could get a good exercise, maybe eat something healthy, but also just not be like on the streets making trouble or getting into trouble. And so I had kind of pursued different kinds of coaching and teaching. I taught a little bit of jiu-jitsu every now and then, but fighting games were kind of always in the back of my mind. It's like, oh, maybe this is what I'm coming back to. And one of the things that I think both fighting games and actual fighting share, like its practitioners share, is we're here to get better, but we have to do so by kicking each other's ass. And that is not something, that kind of direct competition is something that I found, like I'd grown up with it at that point, right? Like debate was similarly adversarial in the short term, but collaborative in the long term. I need to get better to make my teammates better. We're gonna practice against each other. And it might not feel good in the moment, but it'll make us both better, right? I didn't realize that if you didn't engage in one-on-one activities like that, you wouldn't necessarily think about it like that. And it was actually funny because when I came to Riot and I started playing League of Legends, I would practice. I got into League from other fighting game players. They taught me how to play the game. And the way they taught me is we would lane against each other. Right, we'd just do 1v1. And they'd show me like, so this is how you use this ability. Okay, now I'm walking close, so you want to harass me away, blah, 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 blah.
Showing you the moves.
Exactly. Against each other. And when I got to Riot, I learned that if you didn't have a fighting game background, that like playing against a friend was seen as kind of like weird. Like, really? Why don't you just play a lot of games together? And I'm like, no, because I need them to show me how to play the game. How else am I going to learn to play the game if I'm not playing against them and they can tell me what I should be doing better? Right? So it was Jeopardy, actually, the Marvel 3 player known for Zero Nova Iron Man. Was also working at Riot at the time. I'd actually seen him play an exhibition at SCR, and then I saw him join the company. And so we'd play Marvel 3 together. But we'd also, for a little while, we were on the internal Riot Rumble team together. And he would teach me how to play top lane by laning against me and showing me how he played his characters and stuff like that. Because it was a shared understanding we had as fighting game players that the best way for us to level up was to kick each other's ass, right? And that that is how we can kind of best impart our skills into each other. That kind of mentality is something which, once you have it, a lot of things open up in the world. Right?
Absolutely.
It's not just, some of it is like we're all used to failing in fighting games and getting used to failure, and treating that as an opportunity for improvement is, of course, major, don't get me wrong. But there's a specific thing. Remember how I told you that, as the kid who was good in video games in his class, people would stop playing with me, right? It wasn't until I had a friend who taught me that I can lose to him, but he would help me get better, right? That we actually started to learn how to play the games for real. And that, I think, is this crucial understanding that fighting game players share, right? The understanding that not only are we gonna have to hold L's, but you might have to hold L's from your closest friends, right? And if you can do that and come back for more, and eventually you make them lose, and they're like, oh, right? That it is, I consider that to be sacred. So, and now, like when we do our community events for Exert or for any of the other games that we support, my wife and I, when we're, running stuff out of our own garage or at Game Center in Belmont or whatever we're doing, Rev Tuesday, et cetera, a lot of what we're trying to do is help people embrace that and understand that, right? Understand that not only you're gonna lose, but you might lose to people who you will eventually be friends with. You might become friends through losing a lot. Right? And those can be some of the most powerful bonds that you have, because it's not about ignoring relative skill, right? People get really uncomfortable stack ranking each other. Actually, when I started running tournaments at work, I found that some people would get really uncomfortable seeing a stack ranked list of who did well or who did not so well in a bracket. Right?
Oh.
Because they didn't want to be ranked or compared to their peers, right?
Yeah.
And you can think about like, oh, what if I'm like, a principal engineer, but I only got 6th, and the new hire got 1st, right?
Yeah.
Like, what does that say about me, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, it says that one of you is better at fighting games than the other. Who cares?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But some people got so uncomfortable with acknowledging explicit hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
But as fighting game players, we all understand there's a pecking order. We all understand that someone's better than you,
Yeah.
right? You walk into a room, if you know all those players, you could probably look at them and go, yeah, I know how the bracket of this room would work.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's like, looking over the shoulder of the arcade, you see
Yeah.
some people playing, and usually the arcade experiences, you get kind of an idea of where the skill level's at with this kind of community or this particular arcade, and then you're like, oh, I got next, I got this, and then sometimes you'll be right, and that you can beat all these guys and you can beat them all, and then sometimes like you'll run into some really hard people. But yeah, there is a pecking order, and it's very interesting to see how fast you can see that in fighting games, because like you can just kind of watch someone play like a round, and you just see some habits or something that you used to do that you fixed.
Yep.
And you'll be like, okay, like I can see where I stand against this opponent, and then you'll see somebody doing some crazy shit, right? And you can immediately tell. And so I think that's also part of getting better at fighting games, when you start knowing what things are good and what things are not, and you know how to prioritize what needs to be practiced and what's not. Because that's one of the things that's hard about fighting games. People don't know where to put their effort and time. Because like we all know that if you just only practice combos, that's not going to help you. It's going to help you to a certain extent, but like, how do you land those combos, right? And then you're getting to footsies, and you're getting to like, getting the hit, and then how not to get hit. Defense is like a big thing as well. And it's you can see the skill difference very quickly.
Yeah, and in directly competitive activities, it can be easier to kind of push it aside or like politely ignore it or something.
Yeah.
But when you're head to head with each other, your skills are obvious, right? If they're not immediately obvious, they're obvious as soon as you practice.
It's a very vulnerable thing.
It is.
Yeah.
And fighting game players share that in common with each other, right? Costco, all it says is that you're here for a good deal, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone can relate to it. It's actually weirder if you don't like Costco, right? But for fighting games, most people do not subject themselves to such vulnerable experiences recreationally for long periods of time.
Yes, so vulnerability is one of those, I think, vectors of community growth and strength, right? Because you're talking about the Brazilians that were in Japan. There's certain adversity that they're facing, and having that community becomes even more crucial and important in some ways for them than it might be to practitioners in other places, right?
Sure.
So, and I wonder what that kind of is a misunderstanding about fighting games? Is that where some of the vulnerability comes from, or is it like is there some kind of I don't know, where is this? Is it because you're playing these one-on-one games and you know what it's like to be salty in a way that you can't put it on your teammates, and that's kind of the thing that
I think that's a big part of it, right? Is that like, look, video games can make people feel bad in all kinds of crazy creative ways.
Yeah.
And personally, as someone who loves video games as a medium, part of what I like about them is that they can make you feel bad.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it's that you're frustrated that you're not strong enough. Or maybe it's that a certain character in a certain Final Fantasy just gets shanked right in front of you and you didn't expect it, right? There are all kinds of ways that video games can make you feel bad. And ideally, it becomes part of a narrative, either the explicit narrative that's shown in the game or your own personal narrative. Yeah. I think that, I think there's absolutely something vulnerable about subjecting your best whatever it is, whether it's your best Ryu against their best Ken, or if you made cookies and you tried your best, now you're feeding them to people. There's vulnerability anytime you invest time in something, time and effort in something, and then get judged on it.
That's right.
I think fighting games have perhaps one of the harshest forms of this, because if you're bad, you literally don't get to play the game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So like, it's as a game developer, there are all kinds of things you can do to change what kinds of frustration people feel and how they feel it.
Yeah.
And the exact ways in which you do so create different experiences and thus different vulnerabilities. Yeah. We see this in different kinds of fighting games, right? Because different kind of fighting games test you in different ways.
Yeah.
So As an example, if I log on to Marvel vs. Capcom Collection right now and I go into ranked matchmaking, I will probably get matched up with Ducto because for some fucking reason, dude is always playing games. I got paired up with him like a dozen times, over lunch, my lunch break every now and then, right? And when I sit down to play Duck, I sit down and I'm like, okay, maybe I can get a character. I've killed maybe 2 of his characters.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like in separate games. That's
Yeah.
it. But I know that what I'm losing to is an immense amount of skill and mastery in regards to the knowledge of the game.
Of course.
So he's able to understand the game state really well. He understands how to lock me down. He understands all the different options that I have for trying to deal with like the spiral sword spam up front.
Yeah.
He understands that because I have Cyclops as the anti-air assist, he is has to lighten up on the pressure just a little bit because Cyclops is actually pretty good against Spiral.
Yeah.
And then he has the execution required to kill me in a dozen million billion different creative ways, and that's fantastic.
Of course.
And that's different from if I play Virtua Fighter against someone, and I'm not good at Virtua Fighter, but I understand that Virtua Fighter is not a game where you are able to rely solely on execution and specific knowledge of, in this case, combat operations to completely outclass me, right? If I play Virtua Fighter, I know I'm going to be allowed to press a button, which is sometimes much more than I get to do against Duck in Marvel.
Yeah.
So the skills that a game tests you on creates different kinds of emotional experiences. Marvel 2, to me, and I love that game, it feels to me like a actual physical sport to be mastered.
Yeah.
Marvel 2 is the one fighting game that I cannot play while leaning back in my chair. I have to sit up because you can't do a lot of the shit you need to do in that game unless you have, unless you're like fully physically engaged and at the ready.
Yeah.
Virtua Fighter, I don't go deep on Virtua Fighter, but my experience playing Virtua Fighter, or really pretty much any game that is a lot more heavily focused on reads, for example, decision interactions, that kind of thing, is going to be revealing and vulnerable in different ways, right?
Yes.
The first time you get your Dragon Punch baited, you're going to be like, oh no, they know exactly what I want to do, right? In Marvel 2, Duck doesn't care what I want to do. He doesn't have to because he's gotten so good that he's far removed from having to care about whether a scrub like me wants to call an anti-air assist or not, right? So it's different kinds of vulnerability. I look at the way Duck or any high-level Marvel 2 player plays, and I'm like, you have refined your craft, your physical execution, your understanding of the game. This is amazing. And if I play like Daigo in Street Fighter or whatever, I'm not going to go in there and think the same thing about him because what he's gotten good at, or what a good Street Fighter player usually gets good at, is a very different set of skills. And so it feels different. It feels emotionally vulnerable in different ways to get exposed for different things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a steamrolling component of fighting games where, like, I imagine like Marvel MVC2 is definitely a game where if you're outclassed by someone like Ducto, it's just going to be like, your life bar is just going to get erased at a very high speed, right? It's just...
Well, with Duck, it actually happens really slow because Spiral is mostly just going to chip you to death.
Yeah, just chipping you, But I mean, like, I guess this is kind of one of the... I remember when Dragon Ball FighterZ first came out, this was kind of an issue with, like, the eternal fighting game issue kind of came to light where a lot of people go in and there's a big boost in players because the game is new and all the streamers are playing it and everything. And then, I remember seeing like there's one Korean streamer that was checking it out because it's a new game and was playing it and just getting destroyed online with people who knew how to play the game. And Dragon Ball FighterZ, like if you're getting destroyed in that game, it's just like you're basically watching a movie of you getting beaten up over and over and over in cinematic quality, and it looks beautiful, but it's it's about you getting killed. And I think he quit very quickly. I think it was just mid-match, and I don't know if it was like the shame of losing so badly in front of your audience, but there's definitely something about that where. I realized, this is there something that can be done about something like this, right? And then there's like, there's talks of accessibility. There's been this conversation for forever.
Absolutely,
I'm sure you've had this conversation many, many, many times. And I guess what I'm starting to see right now, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, is like, for example, there's modes and stuff that make things easier, like the one-button combo that was in
Modern
Dragon Ball
controls,
Fighters. Yeah, modern
stylish and
controls.
exert, yeah.
But what I noticed is like there's kind of also a push to make the easier controls not just a throwaway thing for like those button mashing scrubs. I think in 2XKO, the last time I'd played at Evo, they had just introduced the pulse feature
fuse,
where you can actually change the combo route of mashing different buttons.
Yeah.
And that was kind of novel, and that was interesting because it adds an element of control instead of just being like just mash one button and the same thing happens, right? So what I kind of noticed with Street Fighter 6 and the way that they did their modern controls, what was interesting was that it looked like they put a lot of thought into the modern control. It wasn't just like this thing where you just, it's like, okay, let's just make some easy, no motion inputs, some control scheme, and then call it a day.
Yeah.
But it's tournament viable. And yeah, I mean, the classic players are winning at the very top or whatever. But it's still like very much like, I've heard a lot of Smash players say they got into Street Fighter 6 because of that.
Yeah.
A lot of people in Japan, I mean, Japan is blowing up right now. And so there's something to be said about like doing that aspect of game design where you're in fighting games where you are, I guess in a way, kind of respecting the beginner players, not understanding like some of the more legacy stuff.
So I guess the way I would describe this is when you sit down and you play Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in an arcade cabinet, there's no disagreement about what this game is.
Yeah.
You put in your quarters, you're both playing at the arcade-provided controls, one player wins, the other player loses, and they get back in line, or they rematch, or whatever. And that is, to me, it is beautiful. I love to see games with a singular vision about what they want. Yeah. And in Marvel 2's case, like, most of that probably wasn't super deliberate. Is mostly just an accident of they had to make a game with there's like 56 characters in there. Yeah. I think they made it in less than a year. Okay, right? Yeah. So like you can only design so many outcomes when you're doing that much with such little time. Yeah. But nevertheless, the game comes out and people play it and people figure out what the game is about, and either you like it or you don't. Yeah. And to me, Marvel is one of the most opinionated fighting games out there. Third Strike and CVS2 also very opinionated, Guilty Gear, and so on and so on. And I love that about them. I think I wouldn't change a thing in any of those games. Yeah. But the cost of video game development has gone up significantly. And so when you're making a game now, you kind of can't necessarily afford to have a singular creative vision like that is so linear in what it expects of players. Yeah. So I look at modern controls and I think, I played Street Fighter 6 for maybe 50 or 60 hours around release, and then I put it down because I knew it wasn't for me. Yeah. As someone who came up in the arcades, I love the skill test of old arcade games, which is why I'm still practicing Marvel 2 combos, and I'm still practicing my CVS 2 combos, and so on and so on and so on. Yeah. Right? That is what I love. Those games were made. I played them. I fell in love with them. It's hard to say if I had encountered something else instead, if I would have loved that instead. Yeah. But for better or worse, I do think that the first fighting game that you fall in love with kind of defines your expectations a little bit about what you think should be in a game. Yeah. So as someone who came of fighting game age for CVS2, Third Strike, Guilty Gear XX, and Marvel 2, I think of fighting games as execution tests. Yeah. Not the only factor, but I'm like, if you don't have to do a certain amount of fundamental physical work if you don't have to invest that time to play this game, I'm not interested. It doesn't feel good to me. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I also lift weights, and if my weight set was replaced with only 5-pounders, I would be like, this is boring, and I don't like it. Of course. Right? Yeah. But that doesn't mean that everyone needs to be moving, plates on plates on plates. Yeah. Right. There should be fighting games for all different kinds of use cases and all different kinds of players who want different kinds of engagement. Sure. Right? Yeah. Virtua Fighter is notoriously a game that is more cerebral because it's more focused on decision interactions and reads than like a bunch of, gnarly 3v3 team chaos decisions. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So for me, when I look at there's the obvious kind of commercial necessity of making it so that more players can engage with their game and find the fun. Of course. Right? Yeah. When I got into fighting games, it wasn't through PvP initially. It was through like World Tour in Alpha 3, right? Where I had plenty of space to kind of figure stuff out on my own. Yeah. So what I think is changing in fighting games is what players want is usually maybe a refinement or an expansion of what came before, but there's also some of the stuff that came before that players don't want anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you like hard execution fighting games, there's a ton out there for you.
Sure. Yeah.
And most of them were made before 2008.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
There's still some out there, but like personally, I'm like around basically Guilty Gear Xrd was to me one of the last games that came out where I'm like, oh, this has what I want in it.
Yeah.
Right. But those games aren't going anywhere. They're still a lot of fun. There's still plenty of people playing them.
Yes.
Right. You can go and get that.
Yeah.
But there are also games that are coming out now that test a bunch of different things.
Yes.
Right. As an example, like I'm sure I could get better at reacting to drive impact if I played more Street Fighter 6.
Oh, yeah,
but I
yeah.
saw that and I was like, I don't think I like that.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
yeah. Because this young 19-year-old kid's gonna like be able to like
I mean, like I don't even know how
Outreact.
age bakes into it. I personally have never had fantastic reactions in fighting
Okay.
games. So I'm like, that is a beautiful skill test. There's someone out there for whom this is what they want in a fighting game and they should have it. Right?
Yeah.
I think the drive meter stuff in Street Fighter 6, the really cool resource management, that basically only kind of got close to like uni grid meter stuff.
Yeah.
I think that stuff's really cool. It's not personally what I'm into. Maybe I'd like it if it's on a different fighting game.
Sure,
Right.
yeah.
But the fact is that, Street Fighter developers, Tekken developers, every fighting game developer is developing their game to test different kinds of skills.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some stuff that they do that will necessarily de-emphasize the old skills in favor of introducing new ones or rounding out the skill test profile.
Yeah. So one of the things that I noticed with the trend of what is the things that they want to focus on now in modern fighting games versus the stuff in the past. And
Yeah.
a lot of things that you see disappearing is some of the really crazy execution requirements to do certain things.
Yeah.
And so now we've got buffers in our combos, and and there's just in general, I mean, you can just look at the trials in the past
Yeah.
for fighting games versus trials now, and
Yeah.
it's just like some of the trials were just almost like they weren't meant to be done, right? They're just
Yeah.
waiting for somebody to walk into it and beat that challenge. But I guess there's kind of the it seems like when people know that that's a thing that the good players are doing and they can't do it, then that's where they a lot of people will think like, oh no, that's that's bad. Like that skill, having to do that is ridiculous. And there's some people that are like, oh, I actually like the fact that that's there. So I remember like I was when we had our venue, there's a guy who came, a young kid. He's probably like, I don't know, he was like 19 or something, and he just came and I was playing Street Fighter 4 with Kevin, and we were just kind of, it was like a nostalgic throwback game that we were just playing, and I was playing Evil Ryu, and I can do the Evil Ryu combos. I still had them.
Yep.
And that kid got so interested in that the combo, he wanted to do it himself, and he realized that was hard. But then he was like, "Oh, now I really want to learn it because you can do it, but I can't do it." And then like I saw him like maybe like a month later, and he was landing like pretty hard combos. Not the he would do like the one that was like a 2-frame link by putting a jab instead of a medium punch. But he was still like doing like Evil Ryu combos, and I was like, wow, there's like this. I would think like. This new generation, like, is this a generational thing, or is it like the person?
Give them more credit.
Yeah,
man.
I should. But like,
No.
but I don't know. Like, am I being like that? There is.
It was cool because he saw you doing it, man.
Yeah,
He saw you doing it, and he walked over and he was like, this old piece of shit. He probably sucks at video games.
Yeah.
How old is he?
I think he was like 19 or something.
19-year-old. Yeah, there's no way this dude's good at fighting games.
Yeah.
I bet. Oh, that thing he's doing, that can't be that hard. I'll do it.
Yeah,
Right?
He's and then he just started playing Evil Ryu, and then but like it's what is it that gets people the itch to do to get better like that? Do you feel like it's like an innate thing that somebody just has, like, because like when you see somebody who's incredible at something, right, and just clearly just at the top of the pecking order where you're at the bottom, there's different ways you can react to that. You can just downplay that skill. You can just be like, well,
Which
that's
plenty of people do.
That's a useless thing.
Yeah.
Like, who cares about that?
I could do that, but I don't want to.
I can do that, but I don't want to. But then there's like people who are like, wow, that's incredible. I might not do that, but that's incredible. And then there's people who are like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are more variations of how people react to some things like that. But I guess like on some level, if we were to have any kind of competitive activity, there needs to be some level of that kind of aspiration or drive, right? And I think with fighting games and some of the executional stuff that, like you said, before 2008, like some of these games are very high execution requirements. But then if you think about it, when those games came out at first, those developers didn't know that you could do that kind of stuff. Like people, when they made Marvel
vs. Or they did, but they never thought that people would
actually do it. Yeah, I think that was Seth Killing was talking about One Frame Links in Street Fighter 4. It's like, okay, we left it in there just in case people can do it. And it's like, oh, now tons of people are just
Boss showed Capcom that the Bison, A group Bison paint the fence combo, the Bunny Kong, he showed them that in a beta test. And they're like, it's fine.
Okay.
Like it's obviously there's developer oversight for that kind of stuff. Yeah. As a fighting game developer, I try not to underestimate what people can do or are willing to do if they want to win.
It's different now though, because I feel like I did a podcast with Apology Man, and he was playing Dragon Ball FighterZ. I think he had something with Piccolo, like some really like crazy busted tech that he showed on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I think Bandai Namco or someone from the team responded and was like, "Oh, thanks for letting us know about that." And then they patched it. And it's like, that's another different kind of culture.
And that's his job now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's right. How he's in that position.
I told him when he joined our team, I told him that our job is to have the fun that we can't allow players to have.
Yeah, but see, this is the thing. Like, how do you know that this is like busted and we have to fix it versus let's let it rock and see where it goes? That must be one of the hardest things to balance, because like, back in the day when they made Marvel vs. Capcom 2, I mean, they probably thought that Sentinel was good, right? But like, when it comes to like tier lists and stuff like that, like having that mapped out, you need the players to play and break the game at its seams, right?
Sure.
And so nowadays, like there's more emphasis on balance. I don't know if this is more from the audience side seeking it. But now that you can patch you can patch a game very frequently if you want. You can patch it like, every week if you wanted, right? So
it's pretty expensive and hard to do, but I get what you're saying.
But it's making balance adjustments and then like people asking about them versus games back in the old days where it was just the arcade. There'd be like a few revisions maybe, and then people wouldn't exactly know. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the Marvel 2 re-release as an example, like the Juggernaut glitch was patched and people were like, we want this back. And so Capcom's like, okay, we'll add a toggle so that you can turn the Juggernaut glitch back on.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
because that was how we wanted it. Right?
Yeah. So
it's funny because I guess the way to think about it is you have, as a developer, you have people who are playing your game. Yeah. And if they're signing up to play a fighting game or any PvP game, they're signing up for a certain amount of effort and a certain amount of pain.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to ask the community what they want.
Yeah.
And then you have to make judgments about whether giving them what they want is actually the thing that would make the game better or not.
Yeah,
right?
I've heard this thing repeatedly that listen to the problem, but don't necessarily listen to their solution.
I mean, solutions are like, sometimes every now and then you hear a good solution, right?
Yeah.
But the thing about, as I'm sure you're aware with working in film and video for as long as you have, is that if you don't understand how the product is made or at what stage something is in development and all the decisions and assumptions that any given part of the work depend on, right? You can't really intelligently talk about solutions because part of understanding the value of a solution is how much does it cost to do.
Yeah, well, not just that, but knowing like the process in general and like what's the hierarchy in the company, like how does the communication get through? Is there enough time? What about the deadlines?
Yeah.
And I think this is what's kind of frustrating about like the online landscape where everyone has an opinion about something and it's like
I mean, everyone always had an opinion. It's just now we might see them show up in our YouTube feed or whatever.
Well, they'll have an opinion about something that they're not deep within. I mean, I've done this too. Like I'm not a part of these companies and like there's questionable things. I'm like, well, why are they doing this, right?
Sure.
But we just as an audience, they see. This is the Jackie Chan quote. Audience doesn't care that it rained on the day of your shoot and you had to cancel that shoot. They only look at good and bad.
Yeah.
So it just has to be good for the audience, and you can't make any excuses internally, right?
Yeah.
And so there is that.
So the thing about making a video game is you make this video game and your players kind of tell you what they like and what they don't like, what they think is fair, what they don't think is fair, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And as a developer, you're responsible for putting a game out that gets people to play it. But you also, like, there is a balance that you want to strike between, like, hey, can I make something that people really, really like?
Yeah.
Right? Personally, as a creative person, I'm much more invested in making things a small chunk of people think is the most amazing shit ever than to something that is kind of good for a large audience.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think the most powerful stuff is when you make something for a small audience and then you realize that actually that audience wasn't as small as you thought.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like Star Wars, when it first came out, it was a big deal, don't get me wrong, for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah.
Right? But like, not that many people realized that they liked science fiction or that they liked space operas or whatever until they saw Star Wars and they're like, hey, I do kind of like this.
Yeah.
There were fighting games before Street Fighter 2. But maybe you didn't see them, or they didn't look that cool, or you didn't have an Atari or whatever.
Yeah.
So you didn't realize that you liked fighting games, and now Street Fighter 2 came out, and you're like, oh, I like this. I think this is cool.
Yeah,
right?
it's definitely something you said about, like, there's a novel factor, right? I mean, if you were to make another, like, a Street Fighter 2 game that's just like Street Fighter 2, it wouldn't have that factor. That's why the games have to, like, put different mechanics in. They have to cycle out stuff. They put the core fundamental aspects of, like the jump system and everything in the game, but they're always rotating. It's interesting what you said about how, like, you'd rather have like a smaller group of people that get really hype about it rather than it being kind of bland for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of an analogy that I made in another podcast. I think it was with Wooly, but I mentioned just like the idea of ketchup and mustard. Like, yes, ketchup is more popular. There's ketchup will never lose to mustard, right?
Yeah.
But I love mustard.
Oh,
like,
mustard's got
mustard is, I think, so much better than ketchup, like in every way. Like I think it's, but there's something, like, there's a part of me that believes maybe the whole nature of this fighting game experiment, this whole thing, is maybe there's a mustard component to fighting games. Maybe there is, like, it's just never going to beat ketchup, but I think mustard is the best, right? And so, I don't know, is there something, do you feel that there's kind of trying to chase this, like trying to chase like this mass audience with fighting games? Is that like a quixotic kind of like an endeavor? Or is it just kind of like instead of thinking of it that way, just make the best thing and then let people find out how awesome it is?
Sure.
Is there...
So I guess the way I think about this is, certainly when I first got into video games as a professional and fighting games as a professional, there's a part of me that was always, one, being like, well, I love this stuff. I love this so profoundly with every fiber of my being. I cannot understand why everyone else doesn't love this the way that I do.
Yeah.
Right? And also, as you realize that not everyone loves it the way you do, then you're like, wait a minute, what's wrong with me? What's different with me that I love this stuff and no one around, other than the other fighting game people, right? Like, I like to say that it's easier to make friends with fighting game players than it is to make your friends into fighting game players.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is that fighting games do something very specific for people, and not everybody needs the things that fighting games do for you, right?
Yeah.
Like I said before, most people do not subject themselves to endlessly frustrating labor recreationally. We get enough of that in our day jobs that you kind of don't need to come home to more of that.
Yeah.
The other way that I'll frame this is that usually, like, if you're living a truly fulfilled life, right?
Yeah.
Your job's in a good place, your relationship's in a good place, you got kids if you want them, whatever, right? Or wherever you are on the timeline of your grand life plan, you probably don't need the things that fighting games offer you.
Sure, yeah.
Whatever needs you have in life, they're fulfilled by other things. And so you look at fighting games and you go, oh, that seems really cool. Maybe I'll watch EVO. Right? But not like, maybe I will try and go and win EVO.
Yeah.
I think that just like because my comparison point here is martial arts, right?
Yeah.
I think martial arts are beautiful. I also grew up with ninjas on TV all the time. So I just assumed that this is what everybody did all the time.
Yeah.
But turns out not everyone wants to engage in recreational hand-to-hand combat. They just don't think that that's something they want to do regularly. Maybe it's because they're scared of getting punched in the face, and eventually you get over that.
I think it's a big one.
Yeah, but eventually you get over that, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's that they don't want to sweat. Maybe it's that they think dance is cooler and they'd rather do that. Maybe there's a whole bunch of other things that fulfill them, right?
Yeah.
I think what I found with fighting games is that the kinds of needs that it fills in your life are, if you don't have that stuff, then this might be the only time, the only thing that gives you that kind of fulfillment.
Yeah.
Right? I was, again, doing actual fighting, and then I was like, you know what? I like fighting games more than this.
Yeah.
So I still do a little bit of actual fighting, but I'm mostly about the fighting games now.
Yeah.
I think that if you're missing that in life,
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? Whether it's the feeling of competition or of individual accomplishment or the feeling of growth or mastery or just having a really fascinating problem to solve, like to think about all the time, right?
Yeah.
I've had fighting games running in the back of my brain for over 25 years at this point,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like never stop thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
For other people, maybe they're thinking about climate change.
Yeah.
Maybe they're thinking about Sudoku. I don't know what it is. For whatever reason, this is what it does for me, and this is the thing that I found that I love.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, obviously not everyone in life is going to be like that, right?
Yeah, there's something to be said about. I think you mentioned that it's easier to make friends who are fighting game
Yeah.
people than to try to get other people into fighting games,
Yes.
right? And it's
Yeah.
and yeah, I would definitely agree with that. But I also I'm wondering if there's something about the harder it is to explain yourself to other people, does that make it more valuable to meet people who are already there that you don't have to explain yourself to, right? And I think that kind of goes back to just
feels
a
nice,
lot of
doesn't it?
communities. Yeah, it's a very, but the thing is you end up like, because what happens is now you see the people who don't understand your thing as kind of like a little bit more outsidery, and the people who are into the thing, or at least they don't have to explain things to you.
Yeah.
Or you don't have to explain to them why you're playing this for hours upon hours and practicing this one combo. You don't ever have to worry about that. When you go to a fighting game event and you're just sitting alone practicing a combo,
Everyone
that's the
there
most
gets it.
normal thing
Yeah.
in the world, right? But if
Yeah.
you're doing that in an airport and you bust out your laptop and you've got an arcade stick, everyone's like, what is
I
he?
mean, I'm sure you know as well as I do, that if you do that in an airport, eventually someone's going to come up and be like, "Oh, that's kind of cool."
Well,
what
yeah,
you got
yeah,
there, right?
eventually, yeah, eventually.
So there are more people out there than you think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the stuff we do is weird. I think human beings are weird. That's one
Sure.
thing I've learned, right?
Yeah,
Whether you're
yeah.
good at the games, bad at the games, doesn't matter. The fact that we are all drawn to this is a little weird,
Yeah,
and it's fine. Everyone's into some kind of weird stuff. It's actually weirder to not have something like that.
Yeah.
My hope is not that everyone gets into fighting games.
yeah,
My hope is that everyone finds something that makes them feel the way that I do about fighting games.
Yeah.
Because their needs are probably different than mine. Right?
Yes,
Maybe
yes.
they weren't brought up in an era where ninjas were on TV all the time, so they don't have aspirations to ninja themselves, right? That's fine.
Yeah.
But there's probably something else. Maybe it's being really good at guitar. Maybe it's being an excellent chef, whatever it is. I think that the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of mastery of craft, right? And
Yeah.
using that as a lens to understand people.
Yeah.
And eventually it becomes not about you, it's about understanding how you can use that craft to serve others.
Yeah.
Right? That to me is the thing that fighting games kind of, you get the core essence of fighting games, that's it. Right?
Yeah.
But that's in all kinds of stuff. And I just want people to find that.
Okay, I guess we can just conclude here. Just one.
I just want to see people be good at shit, man. That's
Yeah.
all I'm here for.
Yeah, no, it's that's watching people get creative with it and innovate and hone. I think all of that. I'm not just an innovator or a honer. I want to be both.
Yeah.
And I'm super. That stuff is super interesting to me. Thank you so much for doing this.
It's my pleasure. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, and I there's so many things that we can talk about, and whenever we meet at the
Y'all
combo
don't realize
breakers
this, but this dude talks my ear off every time we go to an event. We are like this is usually like a hotel room or a show floor, tournament pools conversation. Y'all get to see this on video. You're lucky.
Yeah, it's like two super talkative people that are like
It's true.
that like fighting games,
Yeah.
and it's but you guys got a glimpse of that, so hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
All right.
Here.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Yeah.